The poems I'll be reading in this video were published by Calliope. And Calliope is a magazine produced by the Writer Special Interest Group of American Mensa Limited. Since it's a part of Mensa, I tend to submit some of my more cerebral poems to it, but not always. It depends on what kind of poems I have available at the time. They have published a number of them over the years, and at one point, you're going to see a transition in my poetry around 2015. And I'll interrupt the readings at that point to kind of highlight that transition. A few of these poems also have visual elements that you kind of need to be looking at in order to fully appreciate the meaning and the content of the poem. So, here they are. Imagining what Poe went through. Said the, no, no. Quoth the. Quoth the what? Hmm. Starling? Quoth the starling. No. Magpie? No. Raven? Hmm. Hmm. Raven? Quoth the raven, never mind. No. Quoth the raven, nothing more. No. Hmm. Aha! Quoth the raven, nevermore. Yes, 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 yes. Now, what rhymes with raven? It's alive! The disassembled parts of a dozen failed sonnets lay strewn across the top of my desk. A salvaged line, a turn of phrase, a choice image, a fiendishly clever rhyme, a hauntingly familiar soundbite. My scalpel scrapes away the dross, and words fall like tiny drops of embalming fluid, staining the page with a dull gray scrawl. The nuts and bolts of grammar stitch the pieces together until a new body, cold and motionless, lay on the flat surface of the page. All that remains is for me to breathe a spark of life into its patchwork frame. But as I wait for a final burst of inspiration, I am plagued by the sepulchral image of a mad scientist waiting for lightning to strike the copper umbilical cord that funnels life into a monster's dead organs. Blind fury. The thrill of my accomplishment is deep. It fills me with a wondrous sense of joy. I cannot stop. There is no time for sleep. And food? Who needs it? Not this old boy. I type. I am a madman incarnate. I lose myself in characters and plot as I become the scenes that I create. I have become a typing juggernaut. I type, I type, the letters rat tat tat. I type, I type, my words erupt in flame. I type, I type, a madman with a cat. I type, I type. What was the villain's name? Until at last, with utter blinding rage, I type the last and final page. Comma. Of all the punctuation marks I know, the comma is the worst of them by far. It bangs between the words like stumbled toe and causes me to cry out just as hard. I know I overuse it in my work. I put it after every but or and in my poetry, to pause the words, I throw a comma in and let it stand. Of course, the editors are quite dismayed and chide me for my overzealous pen. They mark so many to delete away. I'm so ashamed that I don't comprehend. But here's a couple lines to vent some steam and let frustration out in comma stream. Okay, comma is autobiographical. I wrote it a long time ago. It's one of my early poems when I learned how to write a sonnet. And at the time, I really did not like commas. And it was mainly because I didn't know when to use them and when not to. And to be honest, I was a bit too lazy to find out what I should be doing with them. It wasn't until I was a graduate student in philosophy and I was assigned to teach English composition as part of my assistantship that I had to learn how to use commas. Even then, I still struggled with it. I have to go through what I write today, and this is like 20 years, 30 years after I wrote this poem. I do a specific proofread draft of my fiction and my poetry to make sure that I am using commas right. Because I developed some very bad habits early on, as this poem indicates. And once you develop a bad habit like that, it's difficult to break them. So, I hope you enjoyed it. Also, if you didn't get that end and why I read it the way that I did, you should look at the last two lines of that poem, and that should clear that up. And speaking of visual elements, the next poem, Patient Zero, also has some of them. So here it is. Patient Zero. Death becomes her, and she becomes death. With each measured breath, she exhales death's minions by the millions, tiny grim reapers with scythes, ready to strike down the healthy. She strolls down the street, and the bell tolls for those she meets, for those she greets, for those she smiles at, laughs with, kisses on the cheek. The bell tolls again and again as she strolls blissfully along, unaware of the death strokes she metes out. Death lingers in the air about her, clinging to her like a dear friend bringing bad news. She is the chilling end for thousands. Not long after I started writing poetry, I set a goal for myself. I had written maybe 50 or 100 poems, and I decided I was going to write 1,000 poems in my lifetime. Now, that may seem like a lot, but really, it's less than one poem a week for 20 years. So if you write 50 poems in a year, 10 years you got 500, 20 years you got 1,000. To me, I was writing more than one poem a week. So I thought, well, I'm going to get this done. But as I noted in my introduction to this channel, there were a couple of times when my writing went way back on the back burner of the things that I was doing, and poetry was very far back. So I ended up taking a couple of hiatuses with not writing any poetry because I was too busy with college and with learning how to teach to do it. Now, in 2014, I was becoming close to my goal. I only had a few hundred left to do. And in 2015, I dove into it to try to finish that project, if you will. And I did it by writing short poems, haiku, brevets, other 3, 4, 5 line poems. And I did a lot of them in 2015 and ended up achieving my goal. Then I thought about it. Now, is it all about numbers? Yes, I wrote 1,000 poems, but were they 1,000 good poems? And so, did I do enough? Well, you be the judge of that for the quality of the poems. Anyway, I had a lot of short poems available for submitting to publications in 2015, 2016, and so forth. So, most of the rest of these poems are going to be short ones. I'd like to say they're haiku, but well, I tend not to follow the strict rules for haiku. Not in the sense of the syllabic count, because that's usually reasonably good 5, 7, 5 in the 3 lines, but in the content. I generally am not writing something that involves a moon sign or nature or something like that. They tend not to be concrete and about a specific experience. And I sometimes don't have that twist at the end that gives the poem a different meaning than the one that is built in the first 2 lines. I call these poems faux or fake haiku. Faux is Faux. And I did a lot of them. Here are a few. Bezique, a game invented when the dog ate half the deck. Hefty Scrabble score. In protest. Untitled haiku. Naked babes sent down river. Indecently exposed. Haiku. Nose above water. Muskrat gasping for breath in the trap I set.